Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm, of course, your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by the co-founders of the Well Experiment, Angela and KB. Angela and KB are two former tech professionals turned certified integrative health coaches who are on a mission to systemically end the culture of burnout with programs that empower companies and their people to be well. Both Angela and KB were so much fun to talk to, and I really want to thank both of them for coming on and having this discussion with me. Also, before we start this, I need to address certain comments that I've been getting from my Burnout episode, my solo episode. I said lofi beats instead of lo-fi, and thank you to everyone who so kindly pointed it out. I say things differently. I'm sorry. I say GIF. I think it's GIF. I don't know how these words are pronounced, okay? So to me, it's lofi, and if you don't like that, you don't have to listen to the show. So tough luck. But in all seriousness, thank you for pointing that out. I will change the vocabulary in my mind. Now, before we get started here, guys, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to you all very soon. Your support means the absolute world to me. Peace. We're good to go. Hey, thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
So before we get too into anything, I wanted to get to know you both a little better. So what kind of got you both inspired to start the Well Experiment?
Yeah, so we have similar stories, but a little different. We both were working in corporate America, checking all the boxes in terms of, doing the career, graduating from college, all of those things. And on paper, both looked really healthy. We were exercising, we were eating right. And like, those are the two big definitions of health, right? But we were burning ourselves out, both, with pressure from our careers, but a lot of it was also self-induced pressure. And so, and we also kind of felt like we were lacking this purpose in our corporate jobs. And so we wanted to come together and create a company that, one, help people realize that there's more to health than just exercise and the food that you eat. It's, a whole picture. It's your mental health. It is your purpose. It's rest. It's your managing your emotions and all of that. And so bringing that into a corporate setting so that people understand that, everything in your life is interconnected. You can't just have a job and then you leave. Your job comes with you most of the time, and your home life goes with you to your job. So being able to understand that everything in life is connected and how to balance all of that so that we don't burn out, so that we don't reach the point that we did where we felt we had to leave our jobs in order to maintain our sanity.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's interesting because often because you're not in the workplace, you just assume that work doesn't follow you home, but then you're at home, and I've had this where you break down or you're just so exhausted you can't say hi to anybody, and you're like, what is going on? I'm out of work. I shouldn't be feeling this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It becomes this all-consuming thing that follows you wherever you go. And it not only infiltrates your mind and your life, it also infiltrates your family's life, and it starts to impact your relationships. And you start to have this inability to kind of create those boundaries where I can step away and I can, prioritize time for myself and my family without letting work follow me there and impact my experiences and impact my relationship and impact my personal life.
Yeah, no, definitely. So why is burnout essentially, why is that so, why do we perceive it as such a good thing? When we work super hard at our job and we only focus on our job to a point where it seems almost toxic, why is it oh, he's got it, or he or she has it all figured out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, we live in a society that glorifies this idea or this concept of busyness. It's that always on the go, working 70 hours a week, running from one thing to the next. And it's instilled in us from a young age. Like, if you think about it, when we were growing up or in school, the student who had straight A's, who was involved in a bunch of after school activities, who was student ASB body president, they were the people who were seen as going to be successful or going to get a scholarship to college or going to do well later in life. And so we're constantly under this chronic stress starting from a young age, and it develops into adulthood. This always on the go, this false sense of the more hours I work, the more productive I am. And that's not true. There's actually a ton of studies out there that show that when you actually take breaks and you give yourself a rest and you give your brain the rest it needs, you can actually come back and do better work. And so it's starting to rewire the way we think of what is success, what is productivity, because busyness has been somewhat of a badge of honor or a false sense of success. And people think that, oh, she's so busy, or he's so busy, he must be really important, or his job must be really important, or her job must be really important. And that's not necessarily the case. But it's getting away from this idea of like time is money and our worth is tied to our time and the amount of work we're putting in, and getting to the idea of the quality of work and how we show up and do our jobs is important. And our own health, both physically, mentally, emotionally, is just important for us to be able to show up and do that job. So if we're not prioritizing that alongside of that work schedule and all that work that we have to do, then we're not going to be able to show up each and every day and do it.
Yeah, I think there's like another side to busyness too, is we use busyness as like an escape and as a distraction. And I know that like I'm personally guilty of that, where I kept myself so busy on the weekends and so busy with work so that I couldn't sit down and think about like, oh, I am not living my purpose in this job that I'm doing that is checking all the boxes, and I'm not keeping me busy enough made me realize like I wasn't able to sit down and be like, well, what can I do to change this? You know, what can I do to make my life better? And instead I just kept myself busy so I didn't have to face like the discomfort of, you know, this life that I thought I was building that was checking all the boxes of the shoulds, that wasn't fulfilling me the way I thought it was supposed to.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't read the book, but I read like a summary of this book. It's from Michael Easter. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. It's called The Comfort Crisis, and he basically in it he mentions how we're never bored anymore. Because, you know, even when you're on your quote unquote downtime, you're on your phone overstimulated for hours. And I'm guilty of that for sure. But I kind of did the same thing as both of you, in the sense where like I would work my butt off at work, and then I'd come home and I would try to distract myself with whatever I could just so I didn't have to focus up here. And then eventually, you know, that catches up to you. But I think that's the problem, is a lot of us are doing that. A lot of us think we're doing downtime, but really we're just trying to distract ourselves so we don't have to go in.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of things we challenge our clients with is, when was the last time you sat for 5 minutes without doing anything, looking at anything, being stimulated by anything, you know? And like, how does that feel? Like, it's, for most people, that's extremely uncomfortable. And you know, what comes up with that? And often where I think we're taught is also as children that, you know, like there's these good and these bad emotions, and there's no such thing as good or bad emotions, or there's just stronger emotions than others. And like, they're all messengers just to tell you something. Like if you feel joy or happiness, like that's probably a sign you're moving in the right direction. But if you feel, you know, sadness or anger or hurt, that's a sign to like correct and like, what can I change here to like make this better? But also acknowledging that those feelings are okay and that they're part of life.
Yeah, definitely. I actually recently, and by recently I mean within the last year, it took that long for me to finally take like the good and the bad emotion and accept both. Because me growing up, it was always, you have to feel good, and if you feel bad, there's like this dark cloud over the word bad, like you can't feel that way. And so like I was, you know, I was in a relationship where neither of us, like, we were not compatible at all. I hope she doesn't hear this, but like, like we just it wasn't on her or me. It was just we weren't good together. And for the first time, I listened to my body go, maybe you should end this because you're not feeling good. And in relationships prior, in friendships prior, in like work and whatever, I would feel that and push it down because I was like, well, that's just me. This is a great job. This is a great person. Like, I'm the only reason I'm feeling that. And for the first time, I was like, you know what? I'm going to listen to that little annoying voice that is telling me maybe I should back out. And immediately I was like, why haven't I done that for so long?
That's well, one, that's amazing that you did that and you did listen to our body, because like so many of us don't. And we always like to say that like symptoms are messengers or emotions are messengers, but they start out quiet until they become into more serious like health problems or relationship problems or dissatisfaction in a job where, you know, for something feels off, but then you just keep focusing on the negative till you've dug yourself into this like dark hole and you don't know if you can, you know, fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, when you guys started the well experiment, did you guys ever get like pushback from people saying like, why are you telling me to take rest instead of work my butt off?
I think it's interesting you say that, because I wouldn't say we've gotten pushback. It's more so people don't know how to do it. And I
Mm,
think it's it it's a bit of a challenge because it's more so like I can't turn it off, or I can't step away, or I don't have time for that because I have a family and I have a job. And so everything for me gets put on the back burner. So I wouldn't say it's pushback in the regard of like, I don't believe that rest is good for me, or I don't believe that if I, that like we always like to say that rest and work are actually partners, they're not enemies. And when you rest, you are able to do better work. So we've never had people kind of go against that. There's a lot of research out there that supports that. But the thing is the thing that we find is people either say they don't have the time, or they don't feel like they're empowered to set those boundaries in their workplace or in their life. And so that's kind of where we come in, is we challenge that and we ask them why. Like, why don't you have the time? Another thing that we do is, what's one small thing you can do each day? So instead of saying, well, I don't have time to rest, or I can't have 8 hours of sleep a night, or I can't take breaks throughout my workday, well, why don't we start with one small one and go from there? And it's really starting to take those baby steps to start to see improvements over time, because someone who is working all the time, always busy, putting themselves on the back burner, they're not going to be able to just completely take on breaks and rest in their life and overhaul their life completely. It's going to be a slow change and a slow process. So I would say the pushback we get is just time and really setting those boundaries for rest. It's not so much around the concept itself.
mm. Yeah, it, I keep going back to how weird it is that like growing up, you're always told that, you know, rest is not as important as work. Like that, I was always told that. And like a good example is like, I mention this every episode, but I was a swimmer. I was a competitive swimmer. And, you know, we would glorify the people that in the summertime when you're supposed to be off or
Mm-hmm.
not, like it's your rest time. It's not
Yeah.
in season, but people that I knew would train 10, 11 times a week harder than they did in the season to get ready for next season. And we glorified those
Mm-hmm.
people. And then, you know, they get injured
Yeah.
and they burn out. But like it
Mm-hmm.
was never a,
Mm-hmm.
hey, good for you for resting. It was more of a, why aren't you training 11 times a week like he is?
Yeah.
So strange.
It is strange. It's interesting you say that too, because one of the things we've noticed is we work with clients, both professional clients privately, in a one-on-one setting, and then we also work with companies. And the primary bulk of what we do is with companies creating wellness programs and doing workshops and coaching with their employees. And it's interesting because everyone says that they want wellness and they want people to be able to prioritize themselves. But at the end of the day, not all of them, I think, fully understand what that means. They say, oh yeah, like they need rest, they need rest. But then they're like, oh, we only have time for one workshop this year. And you're like, okay, you're not really giving your employees that space and that time to be well that you so desperately want them to have. And so I think it's, and not everyone is like that, obviously, but it is this idea of like, we want them to achieve that, but then we're not fully on board with giving them the time away to do it. And so it's a cultural shift. I think it's going to take time. But that it's kind of interesting you say that about swimming, because I feel like we kind of come across the same thing in the corporate world, is they're not fully giving people time to rest and be well.
Yeah, a lot of people say, well, we'll do this for mental health, or we'll do a yoga class or something, but people don't even feel like they have the space to like attend that yoga class because they've got so much time, like other work on their plate, and that they don't want to fall behind on that hour that they could get something else done. And so letting people know that, one, it's okay to like prioritize yourself and like get like movement is good for your body. We always say that, people call a lot of things like, oh, take time for self-care, but there's a lot of things getting passed off as self-care that are actually just your basic needs. So like if you don't have time to eat healthy meals every day, a lot of people don't even take lunch, especially with working from home. Or, you have to wake up at 5 a.m. to get your workout in, even though sleep is the most important thing for the body. That's a basic need. That's not self-care. Rest again is one of those things. And so we say all these things that are really basic needs to be a healthy person and be able to actually perform optimally at your job, but also in your personal life. But we call them self-care, and you're supposed to make time for them outside of your professional life, when really there should be time within your professional life to do these things, because they're going to make you a better professional.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point. It's interesting that, like you just mentioned, the basic human rights are viewed as like taking time for me, as opposed to like, yeah, I got to do this, man. Like it's, I've never even thought of it that way. It's so strange. Like that. Oh,
Right. Well, like we sacrifice sleep. Like sleep is usually the first thing to go when it comes to getting stuff done. I don't have time. Well, I'll just wake up an hour early and get it done, or I'll go to bed an hour or two later because I need to get this done. When your body is both sleep deprived and starving, guess what it's going to prioritize? You're going to pick sleep first over eating. Like that's how important sleep is to us. Yet we are so chronically underrested, I guess would be the term. Yeah. And when it's literally the best thing you can do for your health is to sleep and rest and take that like long break. And yet it's the first thing we toss out the window.
Yeah, it's something I keep thinking about on that topic is like students when they study for exams, sleep is the first thing to go. Like when I was studying, like there'd be nights where I would just go from studying at night straight to practice in the morning for swimming. Like it was like sleep doesn't matter, because if I'm sleeping, I'm wasting time. And then you would see people who are like, yeah, I'm gonna go for a walk for an hour. I just need to get away from the studying. And everyone's like, you're gonna fail. And that's like such a toxic way to think.
Yeah. And those people stepping away probably did better because it gave their brains like breaks to like process and retain that information. Like there are so many studies out there that show that stepping away from a problem is one of the best ways to solve it.
Yeah. Well, they definitely did better than me. That's a guarantee. That's for sure.
I'm like trying to remember back to the days when I studied. It seems so long ago that I feel like I'm aging myself right now. But I'm like, gosh, those days seem ancient.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, no, it definitely was never healthy. Yeah, student life was just survival mode. I swear. It was just such a blur.
Yeah.
So when you go to like corporations, or you talk to people, clients, what are some like what are some of the first steps that people can take to kind of get to where they want to be in terms of their health, both mentally and physically, but also be able to prioritize both that and work as a, like, because I feel like for me, it was always, I was afraid that I would commit too much to the self-care and then I would stop having so much energy into my work. So what are like some of the first steps that you tell clients to do so that it like grows together? It's like an organic balance.
Mhm. Um, that's a great question. And I think, so one of the things that we work with closely at companies specifically is this idea of, I think this term has been thrown around a lot in the last year, but this idea of work-life balance, or creating that balance. We also say it's creating healthy boundaries. But one of the things we always encourage people to do is to prioritize themselves so they can do their work. But when we talk about prioritizing not only our physical health and mental health, that's going to look very different for everyone because everyone's different. And so what works for you physically and mentally may be very different for me. And that's totally okay. So, especially when we're working with companies with a variety of different people with different backgrounds, one of the kind of blanketed recommendations that we can make for them is to create common behavior is as busy professionals, we have a long list of things to do throughout our day and it's chaos and we're just scrambling to get through everything. And so we typically fall off of the wayside. We don't even get on the to-do list. So one of the things we recommend is combining your personal and professional tasks into one list. And it's simple. It's something everyone can do. And essentially what you're doing is adding your personal priorities to your work to-do list throughout the day. So maybe that means you're working out in the morning, or maybe that means you're making a nutritious lunch for once versus skipping lunch, or whatever that looks like for you can be different. But it's combining both of those personal and professional to-dos because majority of us don't do that. So that's usually one of the first steps we encourage people to take. It's also interesting to just kind of take into account what is urgent and important in your life, and prioritize those things, because oftentimes, I mean, we talked a little bit about our phones earlier and social media. A lot of times a big chunk of our day is taken up by scrolling through social media, especially if you check and see how much time you actually spend on your phone. It's taken up doing tasks that are not urgent, they're not important to us. And so by emphasizing things that are important to you, you can really start to optimize your energy and your time for yourself throughout the day. And we also just encourage people to schedule it. So if there's something important to you that's prioritizing you, or if it's professionally important to you and it's getting you to a goal professionally that you want to achieve, block it out on your calendar, and find space for it, because then you're going to actually do it, versus if it's something that, can get pushed off. Maybe it's a workout, again, for instance, I'm just using that as an example, maybe you won't do it.
Yeah, another thing we like to work with people on is just their mindset around everything, and like how you view things, and also just reframing different situations. So a lot of people will say, oh, I don't have time for something. Well, a big reframe we like to do is, instead of saying I don't have time, say it's not a priority, because if it is a priority, you will find time for it. And there's a lot of things that we commit to that may not actually a priority, but we say yes because you feel like you have to. And so again, like setting up those boundaries of, oh, I might be missing out on this thing, but if it gets me to my long-term goal of something else, then that might be an okay loss to have. And understanding that, are the things on your to-do list, as Angela was saying, lining up to your long-term goals instead of just the immediate, like, feel good, busy distraction type of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to caveat on that, as humans, we have the tendency, and especially now with a lot of people have been working from home, depending on what industry you're in, that might be changing here in the near future. But we have this need or this tendency to want to appear productive And it also relates back to that culture of busyness. So oftentimes we'll opt to do busy work tasks or tasks that make us look busy, to have that appearance of productivity, even though that task isn't serving us in any way, shape, or form, and it's not getting us to that long-term goal. So it's being okay with the idea of, I'm taking on this task and I might not look busy today, but it's getting me closer to where I need to be to reach those personal or professional goals that I have in life.
Yeah. So yeah.
And then,
Yeah. You sorry, go for it.
oh, I was just gonna say, and like the other part of it too is just like having like grace and compassion with yourself as you're like going along and figuring this out, because a lot of things you run into with busy professionals too is just the guilt of, I'm not doing enough. Am I letting my coworkers down, my teammates down, by taking a break, by going on vacation. There's a lot of like guilt and shame around that. And just like being compassionate and knowing that like that's what your body needs. And we weren't meant to, like, we're not machines. We're not meant to go like 100 all the time. And going and taking that break, you'll come back with a better mindset and you'll be more rested. So that you'll actually be a better teammate when you come back than if you push through and were hating your job the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we, well, and by we, I often relate to me because I do this sometimes. But I think we often forget that we're not machines and that we're still at the end of the day people. I think often, and then we feel bad when we can't operate like a machine can, which is like the most unrealistic expectation you can put on yourself.
Exactly. Well, I like also to refer to us as think of like a cordless vacuum cleaner, still a machine, right? But you're not, it doesn't work all the time. You have to go and you have to charge it. And if you charge it for 5 minutes and then go use it, it's going to die in 5 minutes again. So you want it to charge and you need that like long charging break, and like think of yourself like that. You need that time, like time to fully relax so that you can get the job done at 100% later instead of starting and stopping and like burning out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think also we worry, man, I have so many friends that do this. We worry way too much about FOMO. Like we have FOMO and we worry about missing out on things even if it's at the cost of an extra hour of sleep. I do it. I know so many friends who like they're like I'm so exhausted and I have so many things to do, but I want to go out so I don't miss anything at the bar. It's like, come on, man. We'll take pictures. We'll film it. Like you can relive it through pictures. Just go sleep, please.
Yes, FOMO is something that we deal with a lot in our practice. You're not the only one who experiences FOMO, nor are your friends. This is something that all of us face. And I think going back to what KB said earlier, it's getting comfortable with saying no is one big piece of it. That's hard and it takes time. But one thing we like to do is, if for instance, going out to the bar or going to a social engagement. I mean, one of the things that stresses many of us out and leads to burnout is overpacked social schedules, because we're working all week and then our weekends are packed. We never have that rest day. And so if you have a social engagement that isn't 100% yes, if there's that intuition inside of you or that gut feeling telling you like, I don't know, then it's a no. And it takes time to get comfortable with it. But the first time you do it, it's so empowering to realize, oh, I can say no to these things. And then you get more comfortable with it as you go. Professionally, we have a lot of people who have FOMO too in the workplace, feeling like they have to show up to every meeting, or if they don't show up to a meeting, they're letting their coworkers down. And it's this, they don't want to miss anything. They don't want to miss important information. And so it's really finding a balance of how can you streamline your processes and your communications in a way that you're still getting the information you need, but you're not overextending yourself. And so I always like to tell this story of a client that I was working with, who she had a big team that she was running, and she found herself burnt out because she was on Zoom calls from 5 a.m. She was on the Pacific West Coast in the US, but she had team members on the East Coast. So she'd be on calls from 5 a.m. until like 7 p.m. at night. And she completely burnt herself out. And she started to realize that it was because she wanted to be there for the people on her team and she didn't want to let them down. And she started carving out a few hours, a few days a week to just handle communications with people on her team. And her kind of epiphany that she had was a lot of things, a lot of information and a lot of challenges can be solved over email in that 2-hour block. And if for some reason it can't be solved over email, then she can schedule that Zoom call for it or that meeting for it, but has to be tried to solve over email first. And it ended up giving her a ton of time back and getting her off of those calls. So I think it's just finding ways to manage and streamline processes in the corporate world to help you, so you're not missing out on any of these things, but you're not physically having to be there for all of them either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, like I was on a Zoom call the other day with work and we didn't need it. Like some of these Zoom calls are just like a little excessive in terms of like, why are we doing this right now? Like I could spend this hour planning something that is not relevant and do something for me. I think it's a weird time that we're in where everything's on Zoom because those little interactions were like you would go get coffee with your boss or with someone, or you would go to the water fountain in the office, or you would whatever. It's all on Zoom now, as opposed to like social interaction.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing to replace it with.
Yeah. Well, it's hard because people want that connection with their team members, but Zoom fatigue is actually a real thing. And so your brain is working twice as hard to try and process yourself over video and the audio separately, where you're talking about, going to get coffee with your boss or going to the water fountain or a coworker stopping by your desk. Those are actually all forms of breaks for your brain. So you're taking a lot more breaks in the office than you were realizing. And now with Zoom, no one's getting that. And your brain is also working twice as hard to try and pick up the nonverbal cues over video while trying to hear audio. And so one of the things we always recommend to people too is a couple of ways you can do like help with the Zoom fatigue is one, does this meeting have an agenda? If it doesn't have an agenda, decline it. Or maybe say I'm not coming because it doesn't have an agenda. And two, if there's like 10 or more people on it, ask if you really need to be there. Because a lot of the times people just invite people to be like, in case you want to. And it's like, if I need to be there, tell me and be very clear. If not, I'm not coming and I'll catch up on the notes. And then also meetings that don't have to be on Zoom, don't have them be on Zoom. Do a walking meeting and take a phone call. Or now that things are starting to lighten up a little bit, maybe you can meet that person in person and have, coffee in real time. But try to find other ways so that it's not 30 minutes back to back on Zoom over and over again.
Yeah, we don't. Well, I mean, maybe we do now, but even like at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't really acknowledge the whole Zoom fatigue thing. We just thought it wasn't that big of an issue.
Yeah. And that's the thing is because in the office, most of my calls were probably on Zoom in the office too, right? But I was getting up and moving conference rooms, or you mentioned you'd have those conversations with your coworkers, so it was a very different experience than sitting in the same chair at your same desk, like just staring at a video screen, which is kind of a new experiment. We haven't ever done this, before at this rate up until literally this past year. Most of the time, even 20 years ago, humans had their face-to-face interactions in the office and then they left and work stayed at the office because they didn't have a cell phone, they didn't have a computer, and stayed there. And now it's constantly with us, following us around everywhere we go, especially if you have a international team as well. So you've got these different time zones where there's communication coming in all the time.
Yeah, we have some coworkers where they have families and the only time they can communicate is like 8 p.m. to midnight. And so on Teams, I'll be getting like notifications from 8 p.m. to midnight. And I'm like, I left the work like 4 hours ago. It's like I don't want to think about this before bed, man. That's not what I want.
No, that's, and then you have like the work dreams, right? Because you the last thing you went to bed is they're asking for something. You're like, ah, oh, now I got to do that in the morning, and it's haunting you all night long.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God. You're absolutely right. The work dreams are the worst. Oh man. S
It's like the problem there with getting Slack or Teams messages at all hours of the day. Something we work with managers and teams on is that if you are somebody working in a different time zone or that's a time that works for you, either have it be okay that when you leave work for the day that you can delete that app, and if there's an emergency somebody can call you. Or if there's a way, I know Slack you can do it, I don't know about Teams, is you can send messages on a delay. So send them so they come in the morning, or if you're writing emails late at night, send them on a delay as well, so that people who do check their email, which you shouldn't, you should just delete it if that's the thing, but they're not getting it, so they're not getting that like rush of anxiety and cortisol before they go to sleep. Because again, just as we talked about, sleep is like the most important thing for you. So finding ways to create those boundaries so that you don't feel like you constantly have to be on all the time, because again, that we need those breaks, and finding different tactics that work for you, and as a manager creating the space that like that's okay, that your team doesn't feel like you have to be on all the time.
hmm And that like the stress before bed is a lot, but even like when you wake up and you have all those messages too, like starting your day off with all that stress,
Mm-hmm.
it just sets the day off. Like it sets the tone for the day. And it's just, you wake up. I've done it where
Mm-hmm.
you wake up and you go, oh God, I have so much crap to do. And that just sets the tone. And I'm miserable for the rest of the day.
Yeah. We always like to challenge the people we work with to wake up and not look at your phone for at least the first 30 minutes of the day. It's hard to do, but common behavior we see is that you roll over and you immediately look at your phone right as you start the day. You either have those group texts, you maybe have a client email that's frustrating you, or you're reading devastating news articles. And again, those cortisol levels immediately spike. And so that leads to a more stressful, chaotic, anxious day versus if you start your day with a state of calm and ease and getting into your day, then that's going to translate into a more focused, less chaotic day. So it's something we often challenge. Some people we work with have done an hour, 2 hours, even the first part of their day where they don't look at their phone. So kind of working your way up to being able to ease into that day.
Yeah, it's oh, what was I going to say? Shoot. Oh yeah, the devastating news. Like that's a big one now because negative headlines sell. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's all the news is
Mm-hmm.
now. It can even like minor things where it's like, oh, this celebrity couple broke up, or like whatever. Like it seems stupid, but like I have a hard time finding positivity in most of the news platforms because negative stuff sells. So you wake up and you see all of that and you go, wow, the world sucks. And that's your tone for the day. It's hard.
It really is. It really is. And I think, it's in the wellness world, morning routines are a big thing. And there's a reason for it. It sets your tone for the day. And it also allows you to create that time to prioritize yourself and focus on what's important to you. And, some people are morning people, some people aren't. So depending on what your morning looks like, it's going to vary. But a lot of successful people meditate first thing in the morning because it helps to manage anxiety and improve cognitive function throughout the day. Some people find that exercise in the morning or even just eating a healthy breakfast can help improve, their focus and reduce their anxiety throughout the day. So it really depends, but there is a lot of research and a lot of great case studies behind how a morning routine can really set your day up for success.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I just like to start my day with writing down 3 things I'm grateful for. So I'm starting my day from a place of gratitude instead of a place from stress. And it's scientifically proven that like high level emotions like gratitude or love are better for your body and your mindset through the entire day.
It's crazy how something that small, changing it from like misery or whatever to gratitude, it's crazy how that can shift not your mental, but also your physical. Like, if you wake up grateful, you all of a sudden have all this energy for the rest of the day, as opposed to just going to work like, oh, when's the shift done?
Yeah,
exactly. And you notice little things like when you start writing down things that you're grateful for daily, you start making the shift in your life that you start looking for other little things that you're grateful for and having like those small moments of gratitude throughout the day. So for me, I noticed that, things that I wouldn't think twice about before, I'd be like, oh, like it smells like flowers out here today. And like, I'm so grateful for that. Or, a coworker said this nice thing to me today, and I'm so grateful for that. Or, my dog is adorable and I'm so grateful for that. Things like you take for granted that you wouldn't even notice that you're like, oh, you just like stop and take a little pause and you're like, this is like a beautiful moment that really brings you into like that present moment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I had a moment like that the other day where oh, what was I doing? I think it was just like walking through I was walking to work and you could smell like the trees. I think it sounds stupid, but like you could smell it with the wind going and I was like, "Hey, that actually smells really nice." And then that like immediately I walked into work. I was like, "Hey guys, what's up?" And they're like, "You're awfully cheery today." It's like, "Yeah, I just smelt a tree." And they're like, "Okay." But it's little things like that.
Exactly. Well, and just like there's tons of scientific like research behind like the benefits of nature for like your mood and well-being and your stress relief. So like one, you got like the gratitude boost, but two, like just the being in nature is so good for your mental health. And it's only been until like the last 100 years, right, that humans have domesticated ourselves. We used to spend all the time outside within nature. And now sometimes, I don't get outside for more than like 15 minutes if it's really rainy here. And that's not normal. And that's probably why a lot of like, besides our culture of busyness and everything else we've talked about, it's another factor contributing to our insane stress levels and our, chronic illnesses and our, poor mental health.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there were a couple days like at the heat of the lockdown where I didn't leave the basement ever because it was either school or work. And like you would go upstairs and like it'd be dark out because the whole morning you were in this little basement office. And it's just like, is this life now? Is this how I'm supposed to live? Like that doesn't feel like much of a life.
so dark.
Mm.
Yeah, it's again, I think with the outside too, a lot of people felt it this past year or more, just not being able to leave their house. And it's one of the things we even say is, even if you can just get outside once, no matter what that looks like, just try to get outside once every day. And then also, you can get a lot of benefits from nature. You don't have to, not everyone has access to nature, or maybe during the pandemic, people didn't feel comfortable going outside. You can still get benefits from nature through other senses as well. So maybe it's listening to nature sounds. I know a lot of meditation apps these days, or even online, you can listen to sounds of nature and have essential oils. So, kind of like how you experienced smelling that tree before going to work, essential oils can do the same sort of thing. Or even just looking at pictures of nature, having house plants. These all are scientifically proven to help boost your mood, reduce stress. So it might not be the exact same as going outside, but it gives you that extra little boost throughout the day.
On the topic of like the lockdown and everything, you know, people have either been working from home this whole time or not working at all. And now that things are starting to lighten up and things are starting to open up again, we're kind of diving headfirst into the workforce again as if the last year didn't really happen. Like I have friends who didn't work since March 2020, and now they're getting back into the workforce 8 hours a day, every day. Like there's no transition period. And so, from both of your perspectives, what would be something that you would want to tell people who may be a little anxious after either working from home and getting their own schedule or not working at all for the last year and are about to dive headfirst into that workforce?
That's a great question. And I think, one of the things we talk about a lot with anything as it relates to your mental, emotional, physical health is having compassion with yourself, because anytime you have a big life change or a life event or a mental, physical, emotional health goal that you're working towards, it's going to be hard. It's a transition. It takes work. We call ourselves the well experiment because it takes experimenting with it. It takes learning. It takes time to really understand what works for you. And so I think going in between a transition any time in life, whether it's from going, from the pandemic, going back to work or working on your physical and mental well-being, is just to have compassion with yourself throughout the process and grace with yourself throughout the process. You're not going to be able to go from 0 hours to 8 hours a day seamlessly and do everything perfect. You might feel uncomfortable along the way, and just being okay with that and those feelings and feeling those feelings and having grace and compassion. And then the other thing is just, if you need help or you need to talk about it, don't be afraid to. Everyone's going through this time that is unprecedented. We've never experienced anything like this before in our lifetimes. And so talking it out, writing it out, even if it's journaling, are great ways to just work through things, and you don't have to go at it alone.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And also, just as we were talking about with like the busyness, does it seems like not only is work going from like 0 to 100 really quickly, but it's also social calendars are going from 0 to 100. So if you're going back to work full time, try to let go of the FOMO, like set those boundaries, and maybe say no to some social events on the weekend so that you do have that time to rest and that you're not packed schedule all day, every day, because it kind of seems like as soon as stuff started to lighten up, all of a sudden the summer just disappeared and there's something on every single day of the calendar already. And so being able to feel comfortable saying no so that you can rest, because it's a lot of work being social. Like work in itself is hard, but then you go and you haven't really had these big group interactions in over a year, and then you put yourself in them and they're very draining. You realize that like, oh, maybe it wasn't the alcohol that I'm hungover from, it was just the people I was around. And giving yourself like grace, knowing that like you've been out of practice for a year, so don't try and stack things on top of each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all great for sure. It's I think we got to be a little nicer to each other right now. To ourselves, sorry. Well, nicer to each other, yeah, of course, but that's not relevant. Like nicer to ourselves, because we're like I mentioned before, we got that unrealistic expectation going where we're just going to assume that things are going to go back to normal and you're going to be able to party super hard. And I'm kind of talking to myself right now when I say this, but you got to take time for yourself for sure. Before I let you guys go, where can my viewers find you?
Yeah, definitely. So you can find us online, WELL experiment.com, on all social media channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. We are at the Well Experiment. If you have questions or want to learn more about our programs, you can also email us directly, hello@thewellexperiment.com.
Awesome. And I'll put that link down below. To all my listeners, I will see you guys next time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.